Imagine this. You wake up, middle of the night, your eyes snap open, your mind feels, well, totally alert. You can see the room around you, the dresser, the window, familiar shapes.
Hmm.
But then this cold dread hits you. You try to move, maybe lift a finger, call out. Nothing. You are completely frozen.
Yeah.
And then it gets worse. This heavy weight presses down on your chest. It feels hard to breathe. And you just know there's something or someone else in the room. It feels absolutely real, terrifyingly real.
It's a chilling description.
Have you ever had that bizarre feeling like you're dreaming, but you know you're awake, just trapped?
That experience, that unsettling state, is exactly what sleep paralysis is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that's really puzzled people for centuries, leading to all sorts of myths and folklore.
And that's what we're tackling today. We're going to, use these sources to really unpack sleep paralysis in this deep dive.
Right.
Our mission really is to sort of separate the myths from the science, understand why it happens, how varied it can be, and importantly, look at ways people can manage it.
Okay, so let's start with a basic definition. What is sleep paralysis? Fundamentally, it's a temporary state. It happens either just as you're drifting off to sleep.
That's the hypnagogic type.
Exactly, hypnagogic. Or, more often actually, right as you're waking up, that's called hypnopompic. The key thing here is atonia.
Atonia, meaning?
It's a brief temporary loss of voluntary muscle control. Your muscles are essentially paralyzed, but, and this is crucial, your eyes can still move, you can still breathe, and you're clearly aware of what's around you.
So it's like your mind wakes up before your body does. That disconnect must feel, well, intense.
Oh, absolutely. People often report really strong physical and emotional sensations. That feeling of pressure on the chest is very common.
The incubus thing.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes called incubus hallucinations. That term comes from old folklore about demons sitting on sleepers. And with that pressure often comes difficulty breathing, a racing heart.
And sheer panic, I imagine.
Overwhelming fear, panic, total helplessness. It's deeply unpleasant.
And then you have the hallucinations themselves, which can be incredibly vivid, right? You mentioned three main types.
That's right. The first type is what we call intruder hallucinations. This is feeling like there's a dangerous person or just some kind of threatening presence right there in the room with you.
Okay, that's the classic sleep paralysis demon people talk about.
That's the one, yes. Often linked to that feeling.
And do those intruder feelings usually come with physical sensations too?
They often do, yeah. Which brings us to the second type, incubus hallucinations. This is specifically that sensation of crushing pressure on the chest. You feel like you're suffocating.
Wow. Okay, and the third type?
The third is quite different, actually. It's vestibular motor hallucinations, or VM. These are illusions of movement.
Like flying.
Like flying, floating, spinning, or even feeling like you're outside your own body and out-of-body experience. Now, these can also be terrifying for some.
But not always.
Interestingly, no. Some people report these VM experiences as actually quite blissful, like a pleasant floating sensation. It's a strange contrast.
It really is. And when you're in that state, feeling trapped, how long does it usually last? Must feel like forever.
It definitely feels like forever. But typically, episodes last anywhere from just a few seconds up to a few minutes. The average is maybe around 6 minutes or so.
6 minutes. Still a long time to be terrified and unable to move.
Absolutely. They usually end on their own, but sometimes being touched or spoken to by someone else can snap you out of it. Or if you can manage an intense effort to move, like really focus on wiggling a toe or a finger, that can break the paralysis too.
You mentioned isolated sleep paralysis, ISP. What makes it isolated, and why is that important?
Good question. Isolated just means the sleep paralysis episodes happen on their own, not as a symptom of another underlying condition, like narcolepsy.
Okay.
If those isolated episodes cause significant fear or distress, then we call it fearful ISP. And if it keeps happening, it's recurrent ISP or recurrent fearful ISP.
Is there a set number for recurrent? Like, how often does it need to happen?
That's the tricky part. There isn't actually a universal agreement on the frequency needed to call it recurrent. But knowing the distinction helps understand if there might be other factors, like narcolepsy, that need addressing.
It sounds like this isn't some rare, obscure thing. Our sources say it's pretty global, right? Terms for it in, like, over 100 cultures.
Absolutely. It's a truly global phenomenon, and it's often woven right into local folklore and beliefs. For centuries, people have tried to explain these terrifying experiences.
Using explanations like witchcraft or demons,
Yeah.
even alien abduction.
Exactly. All sorts of supposed paranormal events have been potentially linked back to what might have actually been sleep paralysis experiences.
And the type of presence people feel or see often reflects their culture, doesn't it? Like, in some African American or Italian cultures, it might be an old witch.
That's right. Or a ghost or a specter in China or Mexico or Thailand. In one region of Italy, Abruzzo, over a third of people who experience it think it's caused by a specific spirit called the pandafesh.
And in Egypt, it's often linked to jinn.
Yes, jinn attacks, which are, supernatural beings in Islamic tradition. Many people there seek traditional cures for it.
And Japan has kanashibari.
Kanashibari, yes, believed to be a demon sent to suffocate you. And among some Inuit groups in Canada, it was thought to be shamans trying to mess with your soul. It's fascinating how the core experience, paralysis, presence, fear is so consistent, but the interpretation varies wildly.
It really is. You mentioned art, too. That painting, Der Nachtmar.
Yes, by Heinrich Füssli from 1781. It's a very famous, striking depiction of a demon, an incubus, sitting right on a sleeping woman's chest. Really captures that suffocating pressure aspect prevalent in Christian-influenced cultures.
So culture clearly shapes the story people tell about the experience. But does it actually change the experience itself? There are a couple of hypotheses here, right?
Yes, two main ideas. One is the panic hallucination hypothesis. The idea here is simple. Being unable to move naturally causes panic.
Which then makes the hallucinations worse.
Exactly. The panic feeds the fear, which makes the hallucinations more intense and terrifying, creating a kind of vicious cycle.
Okay. And the other idea
Is the salience hypothesis, or you could call it cultural priming. This suggests that hearing stories, these cultural narratives about witches or demons associated with sleep paralysis, primes your brain.
primes it how?
It makes you more likely to interpret any vague sense of presence during an episode as one of those specific entities you've heard about. This can increase the fear beforehand, make the episode itself feel more terrifying, and maybe even make episodes happen more often.
And we see actual differences across cultures that seem to support this, like in Denmark versus Egypt.
We do. In Denmark, for example, where these kinds of folklore traditions aren't as strong or pervasive regarding sleep paralysis, people generally report experiencing it less often over their lifetime.
And the episodes themselves are different.
Yes, they tend to report shorter periods of immobility and less fear of actually dying during an episode compared to, say, Egypt.
Where the belief in supernatural causes, like the jinn, is much stronger.
Exactly. In Egypt, people report significantly more lifetime episodes. The average was something like 19 episodes. They also report longer immobility, and remarkably, about 50% feared they might die during it. That strongly suggests a link between the cultural beliefs and the level of fear experienced.
But it might not be just cultural priming, right? Our sources mention some pushback, that sometimes the details people report match stories they haven't even heard.
That's a really important nuance, yes. Some researchers argue that cultural priming can't be the only explanation because sometimes these cross-cultural similarities pop up even without prior exposure to specific folklore. It's not necessarily about debunking spiritual beliefs, but more about adding the layer of scientific understanding what's happening in the brain alongside these cultural interpretations.
Okay, so let's pivot to that. We've talked folklore, let's talk neuroscience. What is happening in the brain during sleep paralysis? You mentioned a mixed state of consciousness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the prevailing theory among researchers. It's like your brain gets caught in between states. It's partially awake, but it also retains some key features of REM sleep.
REM sleep, the rapid eye movement stage where we do most of our dreaming.
Precisely. And during normal REM sleep, your brain is highly active, generating vivid dreams. But crucially, your body experiences a natural muscle paralysis called atonia.
To stop us from, acting out our dreams.
Exactly right. It's a protective mechanism. Sleep paralysis seems to happen when your brain starts to wake up or becomes partially conscious before that natural REM atonia has fully switched off.
So the mind is online, but the body's off switch for movement is still flipped.
That's a good way to put it. Your mind is awake, aware of the room, but your voluntary muscles are still in that temporary REM paralysis state, hence the feeling of being trapped.
Has this been studied in labs? Can they actually see this happening?
They have, yes. Studies where sleep paralysis was sometimes induced, often by disrupting sleep patterns, have provided some key insights. They found episodes were particularly linked to something called SOREMs.
So REMs.
Sleep onset REM periods. Basically, it's when REM sleep happens unusually early after falling asleep, which isn't typical.
Okay, and what did brain scans like EEG show during these episodes?
Well, using polysomnography, or PSG, those sleep studies that measure brain waves, eye movement, muscle activity, they found something interesting. During sleep paralysis, there's an abundance of alpha EEG activity.
Alpha waves. Those are usually associated with being awake but relaxed, right? Like meditating.
Exactly. So you see these wakeful but relaxed brain waves happening at the same time as the muscle atonia persists. It visually confirms that mixed state. They also found that people who had sleep paralysis in the lab often had more stage 1 sleep, that very light sleep, and did worse on attention tests before the SOREMP that led to the episode.
So those incredibly vivid, often terrifying hallucinations, the demons, the figures, they aren't actually external. They're generated by our own brains in this mixed state.
That's the scientific understanding, yes. They're not paranormal phenomena, but rather products of how our brain generates dreams and maintains our sense of self and body awareness. Certain brain areas are likely involved.
Like the amygdala for fear.
Yes, the amygdala, which is central to processing fear, is probably highly active, and may be specific neurotransmitter systems, like those involving serotonin 2A receptors, which are known to be involved in generating hallucinations, especially scary visual ones. It's the brain's own activity, perhaps misinterpreting signals or blending dream imagery with waking perception.
It's just incredible the power of our own minds to create such intense experiences. So, given all this, who tends to experience sleep paralysis more often? Are there specific risk factors?
It definitely seems like some people are more prone to it than others. While we don't know the single exact cause, research points to a combination of factors internal and external. It's multifactorial.
Okay, let's break those down. What about sleep itself? Does poor sleep make it more likely?
Absolutely. That's one of the most consistent findings. Just generally feeling like you have poor sleep quality is strongly linked.
And disrupted sleep, like waking up a lot.
Very significant predictor. One study found that people waking up more than 5 nights a month were 3 times more likely to have sleep paralysis. And general sleep hygiene plays a huge role.
Like not getting enough sleep? Or too much?
Both, actually. Excessively short sleep, say less than 6 hours, or even excessively long sleep, like over 9 hours, seem to increase risk. Long naps, especially over 2 hours, can also be a trigger.
What about trouble getting to sleep? Or odd schedules?
Yes, difficulty falling asleep taking longer than 30 minutes is associated. And irregular schedules, like having very late bedtimes after midnight compared to earlier ones, or doing shift work, definitely disrupt your sleep rhythms and increase the odds.
I remember reading something about sleeping position too. Is sleeping on your back really a factor?
It seems to be yes. Episodes are reported most often when someone is sleeping supine on their back, though technically it can happen in any position.
And does it tend to cluster with other unusual sleep experiences?
It does seem to. People who experience sleep paralysis are also more likely to report having nightmares, other types of hypnopompic hallucinations, those waking hallucinations, or even things like exploding head syndrome.
Exploding head syndrome, what's that?
It sounds dramatic, but it's basically hearing a sudden loud bang or crashing noise just as you're falling asleep or waking up. Also, out-of-body experiences seem more common in this group.
Okay. And what about connections to diagnosed sleep disorders, like narcolepsy?
A very strong link there. Sleep paralysis is one of the classic symptoms of narcolepsy. Prevalence rates are much higher in people with narcolepsy, around 59%, compared to maybe 15% in control groups without narcolepsy.
Any others, like sleep apnea?
Yes. Correlations have also been found with obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, chronic insomnia, and even nocturnal leg cramps. Basically, anything that significantly disrupts sleep architecture can increase the risk.
Given the fear involved, it makes sense to ask about mental health connections. Is there a link?
A very strong link, yes. Generally, poor mental health, and specifically anxiety-related symptoms, are significantly associated with how often someone experiences sleep paralysis. Things like anxiety sensitivity, being very attuned to and fearful of anxiety symptoms, and social anxiety also show connections.
What about diagnosed psychiatric disorders?
Definitely. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, shows significantly higher rates. In some studies, the prevalence in PTSD patients range from 65% up to even 100%, compared to maybe 20-25% in people without PTSD.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
It is. And PTSD symptoms seem linked to both how often sleep paralysis happens and how intense the hallucinations are. There's even some qualitative evidence suggesting PTSD flashbacks might actually manifest as sleep paralysis hallucinations for some people.
That's intense. Are other disorders like panic disorder linked too?
Yes, significantly higher rates in panic disorder patients as well. around 56-59% compared to roughly 19% in controls. People with self-reported anxiety disorders in general are more likely to experience it, and it seems more frequent in groups with severe sleep paralysis who also have bipolar disorder.
And what about just general life stress or past trauma?
Consistently linked. A history of childhood sexual abuse, experiencing other traumatic events, or just reporting high levels of current life stress. All these are associated with more frequent and intense sleep paralysis episodes and hallucinations.
Anything else on the psychological side, like personality traits?
There are some interesting correlations. Higher levels of dissociative experiences while awake, things like feeling detached from yourself, depersonalization or reality derealization, or having memory gaps, amnesia, are related to sleep paralysis frequency and intensity. Also, measures of imaginativeness and even hypnotizability seem to be linked.
Suggesting maybe a predisposition to altered states of consciousness?
Potentially, yeah. That's an area still being explored.
Okay, moving beyond mental health, what about physical health? Any connections there?
Yes, general physical health problems and chronic pain show an association. And interestingly, one factor that emerged is body mass index, or BMI,
Higher BMI is linked.
specifically linked to fearful isolated sleep paralysis. It's an intriguing finding. It could suggest that underlying issues sometimes associated with higher BMI, like maybe undiagnosed sleep apnea or general inflammation, might not just trigger episodes, but perhaps make them feel more frightening. It really shows how interconnected physical and psychological sleep experiences are.
Is there any evidence it runs in families? A genetic link?
There seems to be. Studies report a familial association suggesting moderate genetic influences. The heritability has been estimated at around 53%.
53%, that's quite significant.
It suggests that genetics definitely plays a role, though it's likely interacting with all these other environmental and psychological factors we've discussed.
Okay, what about lifestyle factors like drinking or caffeine? Do they play a role?
The evidence on alcohol and smoking directly causing sleep paralysis is a bit mixed, actually. Some studies find links, others don't. And interestingly, our sources found no significant link between caffeine intake and sleep paralysis.
Oh, really? I might have expected caffeine to be a culprit.
You'd think so, but apparently not directly. However, stopping substances like alcohol or certain antidepressants can cause something called REM rebound.
REM rebound.
Yeah, your brain sort of overcompensates and has more intense REM sleep for a while after withdrawal. And that sudden increase in REM activity can sometimes trigger sleep paralysis episodes temporarily.
That makes sense. And there was one really unexpected finding about intelligence.
Yes, quite unusual. One study reported a significant negative association between IQ scores and reports of having experienced sleep paralysis, particularly the fearful and recurrent types.
So higher IQ linked to less likelihood of reporting it.
That's what this one study suggested. It's very preliminary, of course, needs more research. But it does raise interesting questions maybe about differences in cognitive interpretation or how people explain unusual experiences to themselves or maybe even reporting biases. It's hard to say yet.
Okay, now for the really big question, the one that probably keeps people up at night after an episode, can you actually die from sleep paralysis? Because as you said, it often feels like you're suffocating or under attack.
This is such a crucial point, and the fear is incredibly real. Remember that Egyptian study where over half the participants feared death during episodes?
Yeah.
Despite that intense fear, the clear scientific consensus is no. There's absolutely no evidence that sleep paralysis itself is fatal or causes any direct physical harm.
So medically speaking, it's considered a benign condition, generally harmless.
That's correct. Physically, it's benign. It doesn't damage your body. The real concern, especially for the maybe 10% of people who have recurrent or particularly bothersome episodes, is the significant emotional distress it causes.
And that distress can have knock-on effects.
Exactly. That fear and anxiety can lead to negative thoughts about sleep itself, maybe causing people to avoid going to bed, reduce their sleep time, or develop anxiety specifically around bedtime. And that can lead to chronic sleep deprivation, which, as we know, does have serious long-term health consequences. So the episode itself isn't dangerous, but the fear and resulting behaviors can be detrimental.
That's a really important distinction, reassuring on one hand, but it highlights the mental impact. So, lift talk management. If you find yourself stuck in an episode, what can you actually do in that moment?
The most common advice is to try and focus on making small, intentional movements. Concentrate all your effort on, say, wiggling just one finger or a toe, or even trying to make facial movements like scrunching up your face or trying to cough.
And the idea is that breaks the paralysis.
Often, yes. Those small voluntary movements can sometimes be enough to kind of jumpstart the system and help dissipate the paralysis and the hallucinations.
What about mentally? How do you cope with the terror?
The key thing is to actively remind yourself, even amidst the fear, this is sleep paralysis. It's temporary. It feels terrifying, but it's not actually dangerous. Trying to regulate your breathing, focusing on slow, steady breaths, can also help manage the panic. And if your eyes are open, focusing on a single, real point in the room can sometimes help ground you.
You mentioned sensory stimulation, like someone touching you.
Yes, that can often break an episode. But interestingly, some people report finding that external touch during an episode even more unpleasant or jarring than the paralysis itself, so it's not a universal fix.
Okay, so those are in-the-moment strategies. What about prevention? Reducing the chances of it happening again. Since bad sleep and stress are major factors, I guess improving sleep hygiene is step one.
Absolutely foundational. Good sleep hygiene is key. That means establishing a really consistent sleep schedule, same bedtime, same wake-up time, even on weekends, as much as possible.
Creates a stable rhythm.
Exactly. And optimizing your sleep environment. Make sure it's dark, quiet, and cool. Also, cutting back on alcohol and caffeine, especially later in the day. And the big one for many people, putting away phones, tablets, screens at least an hour before bed. Those blue lights really mess with melatonin production.
And making sure you're actually getting enough sleep, that 7 to 9 hours target.
Crucial. Chronic sleep deprivation is a major trigger. Consistently getting sufficient sleep is probably one of the most protective things you can do.
And given the strong links to anxiety and stress, managing those seems vital too.
Definitely. If stress and anxiety are high, they're likely contributing factors. So incorporating stress management techniques can make a big difference. Things like mindfulness practices, meditation, deep breathing exercises throughout the day, maybe journaling, or if stress is chronic or severe, seeking professional help like counseling or therapy.
Our sources mention some specific therapies too. Cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, CBTI. How does that help with sleep paralysis?
Well, CBTI is the gold standard treatment for insomnia. It works by identifying and changing negative thoughts and behaviors around sleep. By helping you establish healthier sleep patterns and reducing anxiety about sleep, it can indirectly make sleep paralysis less likely just by improving overall sleep quality and consistency.
Makes sense. And then there's a therapy specifically for sleep paralysis, CBT-ISP.
Yes, cognitive behavioral therapy for recurrent isolated sleep paralysis. This is a targeted approach. It focuses directly on reducing the distress caused by the episodes.
How does it do that?
It involves several components. You learn to self-monitor your episodes, maybe keep a sleep diary. You get psychoeducation, understanding what sleep paralysis is, what triggers it. A big part is cognitive restructuring, challenging those catastrophic thoughts you might have during an episode, like I'm dying or I'm being attacked.
So changing the narrative around the fear.
Precisely. And it teaches practical techniques too, like mentally rehearsing destruction techniques, vividly imagining making those small movements to break the paralysis, and learning to use relaxation and mindfulness during an episode to try and stay calm, maybe using calming self-talk or focusing attention away from the hallucinations.
Does it work?
Studies show it can be quite effective. People report fewer episodes, less anxiety and worry about them afterwards, improved mood, and a greater sense of control. The positive effects seem to last for several months, maybe 4 to 6 months or more post-treatment.
That sounds really promising. Are there other therapeutic approaches? I think you mentioned one that contrasts with CBT a bit.
Yes, there's another approach called focused attention meditation and muscle relaxation therapy, or MR therapy. This one has some interesting differences.
How so?
MR therapy teaches you to, first, reappraise the attack. See it as something ordinary, temporary, just a weird byproduct of sleep. Then, to psychologically and emotionally distance yourself from the fear, recognizing that panic just makes it worse.
Okay, that sounds similar to CBT so far.
Where it differs is in the active strategies. Instead of trying to move, MR therapy encourages focusing your attention inward on something positive and calming, like a happy memory, a mantra, a prayer, something pleasant. And importantly, it involves practicing progressive muscle relaxation, but specifically tells you not to focus on controlling your breath.
Oh, that is different. CBT often uses breathing techniques and encourages trying to move.
Exactly. MR therapy actively discourages trying to move, viewing it as potentially counterproductive, and sees deliberate breath control or even prayer during an episode as potentially reinforcing unhelpful beliefs or acting as reassurance seeking. CBT, on the other hand, embraces trying to move and uses breathing as a tool for relaxation and regaining control. So they offer different paths to managing the experience.
Interesting. Depends on what resonates with the individual, I suppose. Lastly, what about medications? Are there drugs that can help prevent sleep paralysis?
It's an option that healthcare providers might consider, especially if episodes are very frequent, incredibly distressing, and haven't responded well to behavioral strategies. Certain types of antidepressants, like SSRIs or older TCAs, can sometimes be used
Why antidepressants?
because they tend to suppress REM sleep. Less REM sleep, potentially fewer opportunities for REM-related phenomena like sleep paralysis to occur. For people with narcolepsy, stimulants used to treat the narcolepsy might also help with the sleep paralysis symptom.
But it's not a first-line treatment.
Generally not, no. And it's important to stress that the evidence specifically for sleep paralysis is still somewhat limited. We need more targeted research. Medications are usually considered more cautiously, weighing the potential benefits against side effects, often after trying sleep hygiene, stress management, and possibly therapy first.
Okay. So, wrapping this up, we've really journeyed through sleep paralysis from the terrifying folklore and personal experiences, through the fascinating neuroscience of mixed sleep states, to the practical factors that influence it and how it can be managed. It's striking how something so universally frightening is, scientifically speaking, usually harmless.
It really is. It underscores this incredible interplay between our brain's biology, our cultural context and beliefs, and the very real, very intense subjective reality we can experience, especially in these boundary states between sleep and wakefulness.
It definitely leaves you thinking. This strange window into sleep paralysis, what does it ultimately reveal about our brain's amazing, sometimes bewildering capacity to construct our reality, particularly when it encounters something it can't easily explain? Something to ponder, perhaps, next time you drift off to sleep.